Dr. Graham Downing has been, well, initially he was coming to, you got a stalker? Has been coming into my workshops and presentations since about 2010. And, you know, he knew the right way to reach out to me because he came to an event in London that I did at the Connell Rooms and he offered to buy me dinner. And I said, "Are you married?" He went, "Oh, yeah, that's okay then." Okay. Good. And I had my son with me anyway, so he bought us both dinner. But anyway, and then Graham spoke at AV9, which is 4 years ago now. And so, you know, he's been at every event. And the last two events, as I said, he's given 2 presentations. And last year was, well, I would say his opus magnum, really. The presentation on artificial intelligence and transhumanism. It's only been up on YouTube a few weeks, and I think it's had something like 15,000 views or something already. But Graham is going to push the boundaries of artificial intelligence and transhumanism somewhat further today. And so he has blagged a bit of extra time. So, you know, we are going, just to give you, so you know, you're not sitting on the edge of your seats with him, "Where's my dinner, where's my dinner?" So, but he is going to be talking until about 6:30, and then from there we'll be going to dinner. So, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Graham Downing.
Welcome. You came back. I didn't scare you enough last time there, no? Okay. There's going to be a part, I'm going to go real quick. Okay, first off, there's going to be a part of this talk where I'm going to talk about 5G. There's some horrible bits in it, and there's some material, supportive material about that on my website there, okay? And there's a solution there as well. So take note of that quickly, and I'll put the slide up at the end if I remember, okay? Also, no questions, please, because there really isn't any time. At the end, if I've got time, I'll answer questions. If not, grab me afterwards, okay? Okay, so quick review from last year, where we mentioned, what was the very first slide last year? Cambridge Analytica. That was a good guess, wasn't it? What we said, this reflects what we said last year. You're going to hear all about AI. We've got to merge with robots. Robots are great, and they're all going to take your jobs. I mentioned this paper last year, which was talking about a new type of computing they want. This was released by the White House, and they want to build computing systems that allow us to work with robots, and the systems are going to run themselves, they're going to code themselves, humans aren't going to be anywhere near them, they're going to deter, detect, protect, and adapt, and they're going to be used for everything. So basically it's Skynet. They're also going to have autonomous capabilities, they're going to be human-machine augmented capabilities, and they're going to reverse engineer us, because they want to create this thinking thing that's going to run it all, and they're going to have the designs up large scale within, say, 10 to 15 years, probably 12 years away now. And we also introduced the fact they're going to start looking at running everything with it. UK Power Grid was one thing. We reminded ourselves, is that a good idea if robots are doing it? AI is doing it, and it's speaking to itself, and we don't even know what it's saying to itself. And we were reminded of Professor Kaczynski there, who was the Unabomber, who said, if you allow them to do this, then you've had it. It's suicide, because you will not be able to live without these things. Is that reasonably in focus? Good. We introduced from legal papers, they were going to bring in a social credit system in China, and it's a bit like a Facebook system, where if the government likes you, it's great. If they don't like you, you get punished. That's already started this month, I think. They're bringing in the bans, and that's the beginning, and you can imagine where the punishment's going to go from there. I talked about loads of scientists, loads of doctors. This was one guy, I'm sure he's a nice guy, but I didn't agree with him because he wanted to inject embryos with seeds of self-growing computers. So when your baby's born, it's already a computer, okay? He's an English professor. I went onto his Twitter page, and that was his Twitter page. I'm not quite sure what all that's about, but it's called wetware, and loads of people are talking about wetware. We also talked about this book. We mentioned loads of stuff, just to give you a flavor, and it talked about making copies of humans and put them into this digital world. But all the time, they're forgetting about the human. It's always about this digital. Now, it's already started. In January, a company this year was launched. I think it was in a company in this country, and they're talking about your own personal avatar. It's 3D, works on blockchain, looks like you, speaks like you, and acts like you, and it interacts with everyone, so there's not much point you being around, really, is there? And this stuff's getting pretty advanced.
So, this is Baby. She's sort of looking at us and hearing us, so if I make a loud noise, you know, she'll get a fright. This is what she can see, so you can see my face here. Hey, see that? Right, so she's not copying my smile. She's responding to me. And now this is her little baby's first word book. So you can pick a page, show her something, but she has to be looking at it. So get her attention.
Hi, baby. Hi. 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 What do you see? What's this?
Puppy.
Puppy. Very good. What's that, baby?
Apple.
Hi, baby. Hi. What do you see, baby?
Sheep.
Sheep. Very good, baby.
I think that's pretty awful myself, but it's scary. The Dalai Lama thinks that the 2045 Avatar project is good, so it must be good. This guy here is the public face. He's leading the direction in the world. So he's basically deciding where all our futures are and our kids' futures are. And he says he wants to upload your consciousness into the web. They've already started a company this year. Unfortunately, they've got to kill you first, which is not that great an idea. If anyone says this to you, run a mile. You're going to see over the next 10, 20, 30 years, they're going to be showing you these incredible virtual worlds where everything's great and you can live in it. Don't believe it. Okay? It's a very good way to reduce the population. AI is not all smooth sailing. You've got this a doctor here saying, look, it's not that great, and we've still got problems with it, so don't get me wrong. Someone's got to actually build this stuff. But nevertheless, at the moment, this is roughly where we are. We're in control, just about. AI is underneath us. You've got blockchain coming in, 5G, because you need this massive bandwidth to get all this information on the web. You've got social media, because you need the social side to move along with the technological changes. And then the Internet of Things, where everything's got to be labeled and represented on the web. Okay, it's rapidly going to become that. We are going to be removed from the picture. Social media is becoming citizen media, and China is the template, really, for the rest of the world. This is the guy, we talked about this guy from the Royal Society of Arts, which I thought was a benign, little, lovely organization. How wrong was I? They talking about basic income. This was a pilot in Scotland they were running, and he was saying it should be radical and world-changing. It's about giving everyone a basic income, which sounds fantastic, but it's not. Because like he said, it's a starting point. It's a beginning of a social contract. And then we want to start talking about how you own land and how you own things. And reality, my view of this is, you won't own anything, okay? You'll have no power. No, you won't even have power of your own privacy, okay? So I do not believe it's a good idea. I showed you some documents showing you that. The studies show that you'll be poorer on basic income, and the newest thing we've got at the moment is universal credit, and universal credit definitely means you will be poorer. Okay, so we were pretty accurate on that. Other people said, look, when we bring this basic income in, some of you are going to have to undergo training. We need to be educators and community organizers, and it will be coupled with socio-educational training. We've all heard this before. Begins with com, ends with ism, it's got UN in the middle. Right? And we also talked about this gender-neutral stuff coming in, and this was what people in Princeton were handed, how to speak properly. Don't say chairman, say chairperson. We all went, okay, that's a bit odd maybe, but okay, if someone wants that, no problem, we'll do that. Well, that was the first strike. Then you had these guys like Professor Parrish here saying, well, you know what, if you speak English, you need to be taxed, because poor people in third world countries have got to learn it. And this is all about control. It's about controlling everything and controlling language. The next shot has just come in, the pronouns have gone. So now you've got to use ze and they and her, and already I think in a couple of universities in England, they mark you down if you don't do it. In the States, there's legal backing to this. You will be fined if you don't do it in certain places, I think Canada and certain states in America. I've got nothing against anyone. I'm classical liberal. If you want me to call you ze or zero, I've got no problem. But I think this is dangerous for all of us, because we're not going to be able to speak to each other soon. I'll show you that in a second. And of course, mum and dad's got to go. That's pretty obvious. That's the next thing's got to go. This isn't gender equality, it's gender destruction, okay? And I've been saying that for many years. But what about the next step? We're here with the pronouns. What's the next one? Adjectives. Yeah? It's going to be very difficult to speak to a group of people. They've all got different pronouns. There's, up to 200 different ways of identifying yourself now. That's going to be awkward. What about when you start putting adjectives in? The statistical chance of you constructing one sentence without falling foul of the law is going to be very, very, well, it's going to be almost impossible. You multiply that by all the sentences in a paragraph, forget it. It's not going to happen. Okay, and as I said before, it's nothing about what you want to call yourself, it's we are not going to be able to speak to each other. But what about literature? All the world's a stage and all the men and women are merely players. Is that next to go? What about art? The woman clothed with the sun. Well, that's sexist. What about poetry? The mother's return. Well, mother and father's going to be removed. What about all the songs with mum and dad in it? What about all the songs with boy and girl, and I love you, and let's get married, and all the normal things around gender? You watch. Some of those big organizations that you know who runs them, they're going to sue a radio station. You just watch. And when they do that, the rest will fall. Because people are generally cowards. They won't stand up. Well, that has to change because we do have to stand up. And this is not about being equal. Okay? It's got nothing to do with that. It's about we aren't going to be able to communicate with each other. All right? And it's a very powerful tool, this. And the problem is, once you start pulling that thread, okay, the whole thing's going to come undone. But classical music's okay, isn't it? Beethoven? It's a very powerful tool. Apparently he's a chauvinist. That'll have to go. It was a lot easier in the olden days, wasn't it? But you know what, Dad? Come on, Dad, you've got to come out. Put this chip in your head. Why don't you put this device on so that when you go out, it will read your thoughts and it will translate what you're going to say in a gender-neutral way. You can just imagine this, the future of transhumanism. They're already starting the research, reading the thoughts, actually being able to pick out the words from your brain. This is embryonic, but you can see how this may develop, okay? Now, understanding how the brain works is important because we are absolutely assaulted with information, especially if you're on Facebook. You need to know how your brain works. Believe it or not, you may not know that, even though you may be 50, 60, or 70 years old. So quickly read that list. There's 15 words on there. It won't take long. Ready, 2, boom. All right. When psychologists do that test, they usually leave quite a while before they retest you. We haven't got that, so we're going to do it quickly. Anyway, everyone shut their eyes. It was late at night when the phone rang and a voice gave a frantic cry. The spy threw the secret document into the fireplace just in time, since 30 seconds longer would have been too late. Open your eyes. Okay. Now, as I said, we'd normally have at least 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes before we do this, but call out some of the names off the list. Drowsy, sleep, snore, slumber. Yeah? Okay. When you test this, people can only remember about a third of them. All right? And then also, quite a few people said sleep. Show me where sleep was on there. You don't remember detail, and you make things up. Okay? The story, what happened in the story? Why did the spy throw the documents into the fireplace? Yeah. And what people think is, yeah, 30 seconds, he needs to burn the documents. This is what your mind tells you. But the reality is, no one mentioned anything about burning documents. This is simple stuff, but they've done studies on this. Okay? And the problem is as part of normal comprehension, we construct models. Okay? We draw on our general world knowledge about objects in the environment, people's intentions and actions, and we run the risk of importing new information and wrong information. You don't store everything with your memory. I've just shown you that. You can't remember a list of 15 words 1 minute later. You associate with what you know. We create what we recall, okay, based on what we expect. This is not grammatically correct, but don't worry. Linked to what we believe to expect, okay? Therefore, what influences what we believe influences what we remember. Now, this is massive because when you're on Facebook and places like that, you absolutely are having your brain worked on, okay? It's absolutely getting beaten up, and people are trying to convince you. Cambridge Analytica, that's what they did. That's part of what they did. So be very, very careful what you open yourself up to. Who's had this? You turn left in a car and you knock a motorcyclist over. Very, very common. Why is that? Why can't you see a dirty, great bloke sitting on a bike? Because what happens is called inattention blindness. Your brain works in patterns. It turns left a lot or right. It doesn't ever expect to see a bike. So what's the point of remembering that? So when it turns and it sees a bike, it wipes it out because it's below the level of conscious awareness. So the image is here, it rubs the bike out and gives you an image without a bike, so you knock it over. It's called inattention blindness. And you can't, this is it, you can't easily detect between what you should recall and what you create. And this is very important, and this is used to manipulate how you think and feel. You've seen it in the movies. Jennifer, what's her name? Jennifer, what's that movie star? Jennifer, any of those ones. So she's in the scene, she's got a scarf on. Jennifer Roberts, is it Roberts? One, I can't remember. Julie Roberts, that's it. So she's got a scarf on. The scene goes to the next thing, goes back, and her scarf's gone, yeah? In one scene, she's eating a donut, goes back, and she's eating a Cornish pasty, right? Everyone, you can't see those things. They've got students, they give them a little clip and said, there's 10 things missing here. They barely get 20% of them. And they've even had, say, someone banging an alien, they've gone off shot, gone back, it's a completely different person. They don't notice it. Because your brain isn't expecting it to change. Your brain is an incredible thing. And they've done this study, they've done it out in public. They've got someone to interview someone. They've distracted the person being interviewed, they've turned back, and they've changed the interviewer. Completely different person. And they only spot it in real life 50% of the time. And you only spot it if it's the same social group as you. Your mind is an incredible thing, absolutely incredible. And this is why it's important, because this study shows you why. Unconscious plagiarism is someone tells you something, you go round the corner, a minute later, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, a week later, and you think it's your idea. But someone else has put it in your head. They studied this, they had 2 groups, and they said, right, you go in with this guy, he's an authority on traffic accidents. You guys go in with this guy, he's not an authority, but have a chat about traffic accidents. They took them out afterwards, they distracted them, and then they tested them. And the highest level of unconscious plagiarism was from the group with the guy who was the authority. So what this tells us, and it informs us, is when you listen to people you think have authority, their ideas can become your ideas. You can walk away and you can actually think what you've been told is your idea. Where do you get authority? Where do you get it every day of the week pumped into you? All right? You've got to be so careful because you think this won't affect me. This won't affect me. I can see you. There you are. We've got a camera here in the audience. There you are. This is all nonsense. It's all psychological rubbish. If someone was going to change me, I'd know all about it. Well, if we asked him that in the 70s, yeah, you can be changed, okay? It's important that you understand that. And there's a huge science behind this. Okay, let's watch this video.
Gentlemen, I have a plan. It's called blackmail. As you know, the royal family of Britain are the wealthiest landowners in the world. Either the royal family pays us an exorbitant amount of money, or we make it seem that Prince Charles has had an affair outside of marriage and therefore would have to divorce.
Prince Charles did have an affair. He admitted it, and they are now divorced.
Right, okay, people, you have to tell me these things, all right? I've been frozen for 30 years, okay? Throw me a frickin' bone here. I'm the boss. Need the info. Okay, no problem. Here's my second plan. Back in the 60s, I developed a weather-changing machine, which was in essence a sophisticated heat beam, which we called a laser. Using these lasers, we punch a hole in the protective layer around the world, which we call the ozone layer. Slowly but surely, ultraviolet rays would pour in, increasing the risk of skin cancer that is, unless the world pays us a hefty ransom.
That also already has happened.
Shit.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have a plan! Now, if this global reinvention is to work, there might be a few competitors that are unfortunately eliminated. Oopsie!
Perfect trajectory. All systems go. We expect to enter orbit right on the nose, sir.
Wait, something's happened.
Just a moment, Mr. White.
Scanners have gone crazy. Premature first stage separation.
It doesn't make sense.
Stand by to abort.
We can't control it, sir. Abort it!
It's negative.
We can't. Something's taken over the guidance system.
It's as if it had a will of its own.
And there's not a damn thing we can do about it at the moment. Where is it now?
Approaching North Dakota.
Alert Strategic Air Command.
Give me an overland attack.
Attention all personnel.
Attention all personnel. We have a red alert. Stand by for emergency procedure.
Oh, behave.
Okay, so that was Bill Gates, and the CEO of Microsoft. That was a joke, okay? I'm not saying he did that. He's just launching a new satellite thing, isn't he? To film the whole of the world all the time. Isn't it called Earth Now or something like that? Anyway, a lot's happened in 125 years, all the way from Tesla, from the AC power systems, up to the 20s using radio. Prior to that, it was campfires and kerosene and all the rest of it. This is from Dr. Cruz's site. And then we had microwave, which was microwave radar for warfare, all the way through to cellular communication in the 80s. And then from the 90s, a lot has changed. As you can read there, the first mile above the Earth is now filled with 2 million times the amount of electromagnetic radiation, EMF, than we had in 1900. And this is from the American figures. And the EPA stopped measuring in 1979. So we are facing a huge pollution with this. Now, this is important because for about 4 billion years, the energies that surrounded us were simple. We had a kind of Schumann resonance, this kind of great big long wave that goes around the Earth. It was modulated by solar and lunar cycles. You had some distant kind of radio, if you like, and some UV light and infrared. And it's changed a lot. Now, many scientists are talking about this because they're saying, look, this 5G rollout, this is crazy because we know it causes harm and no one's really tested it properly. And I'm not an expert in 5G, but I listen to experts. There's other people here speaking this week who are experts. But what he's saying is what's known. It isn't 1G, 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G. 5G is off the scale. Massive order increase in radiation. And we know it causes damage to the human, okay? Now, lots of people have seen stuff like on YouTube like this where they're putting Wi-Fi near plants or near, in this case, garden crest, and they're growing it compared to Wi-Fi a little bit further apart. And you can see you get much higher yield when you have the Wi-Fi further apart, further away from it rather. And what you're seeing is an anti-life technology. There's no doubt about that. I haven't got time to talk about this, but the atmosphere, you know, with carbon dioxide, with water, with ozone, it absorbs this stuff. This is a massive, you can imagine those satellites everywhere around the world just beaming this stuff into the Earth. It's going to be horrendous. It's a really reckless thing to do. There's some debate about this, but certain frequencies can possibly weaken the blood-brain barrier, so toxins in your body from things like vaccines and other things can maybe gain access to the brain. We don't need this, okay? It's pretty obvious. Huge amount of studies. Loads amount of studies saying tumors related. I've known about this for over 3 decades, okay? High risk of intracranial tumor from phone use. Multiple studies showing you're twice as likely to get a glioma if you use the phone more than not. Other studies showing that the longer you use the phone, for every year more you use the phone, your risk of death goes up if you get a tumor. You won't survive it as well. This guy, everyone's going to talk about this guy if they're going to talk about the subject, Professor Paul. And what he's saying is, look, everyone says, oh, it's not that problem. It's just thermal effects. It's just like a heating effect. Don't worry about it. He's saying, no, it's not the case. The damage goes into the body. And he says it's through the channels in cells. Okay? And in the body, these particular cells can be dysregulated. Now, cells are in these channels are in pretty much every cell in your body. So anywhere from your brain all through your body can be affected. And there's a membrane with a channel. And he says these studies provide strong evidence that these fields can produce an almost instantaneous activation of these cells. They're called voltage-gated calcium channels. They're everywhere. Now, they've done lots of studies showing different powers of radiation on animals, live animals. This one, long-term memory was reduced. Okay, now remember that. We'll go back to that. But they say, oh, look, in all the safety things, don't worry, all the safety manuals, once you go above a certain frequency, it all gets deposited as heat into the skin. Okay, but these studies disagree with that. There's another 11 research groups have said, look, well above that safety range, 40 to 130 gigahertz of this millimeter radiation, it says it significantly impacts nerve tissue in live animals. It gets into you. Another study shows it affected the hypothalamus in the brain, part of your endocrine system. And it wasn't a phone here, it was 40 centimeters away. Okay? Now, this is the turning point for me, not particularly this study, but in understanding this. a little while ago, I thought, my God, no one's really talking about this. This stuff is so dangerous. It's not like normal EMF, where you've got half a chance. Because of the nature of how it's transmitted, you have to have direct line of sight. And people will tell you this today. So you've got to have antennae everywhere. You know, at least millions and maybe more. You are not going to get away from this, okay? And it is absolutely horrendous. Now, everyone sees things differently. She's probably a nice girl, this girl, but I disagree with what she says.
What if you could see Wi-Fi signals? It sure would make it easier to figure out where to go to check your email for free. I'm Jen Markham on Buzz60. Artist Nikolai Lamb, known for his photo manipulations, created a series of images of Washington, D.C. landmarks illustrating Wi-Fi signals as different colors. Using data from a Wi-Fi coverage map on the city's website, Lamb depicted how the energy from a Wi-Fi signal travels in waves with different channels, emits the source in a sphere. He also showed how the data travels from routers on multiple signals or colors at the same time, and how trees and buildings can disrupt the signal. Lamb used color to show the individual channels that make up an overall Wi-Fi signal. It'd be so cool if this was a real thing. Can you imagine all the color exploding in dense urban areas? Now all we need is for the passwords to be visible too. Buzz60. Now you know, pass it on.
Okay, now you know it, pass it on. She's probably a nice girl, but I'm sorry, I don't agree with that. This is called the Architecture of Radio app. You can download it. So, Architecture of Radio. This is what is probably a more truer representation. Someone should download it and look what's going on in the room. That's pretty frightening, isn't it? That we're children and us and babies and old people and young, we're all just sitting in this stuff. And we're so stupid because we can't see it. We don't think it's going to cause a problem. Now, this stuff, the EMFs, the radiation, you can't demodulate it. Once it's created, it's there forever, according to Einstein, infinity. And the ionosphere can trap this stuff in. So we're filling our bin up, but we're not being able to empty it. Okay, it doesn't apply to all of it, but some of it does. Now, this is interesting because, I'll relate it in a second, it's because studies are showing that biological entities are coming from space down to Earth, okay? Now, the International Space Station had a problem with this. They were cleaning their windows outside on the International Space Station, and they found a load of bugs. They thought, oh, this is odd. How did they survive up here? They must have come from Earth. And we do have examples of very, very tough bugs. This is a tardigrade. You can absolutely fry this thing, freeze it, put unbelievable pressure on it, and it will not go away. So we do have examples of that. But English scientists looked at this and said, no, we've got bacterial entities. They're definitely from space. And here's a picture of 3 of them. And they've got carbon and oxygen. And they're not space dust. They're real. The problem is there's 0.1 tons of this stuff falling every day. And this stuff is very, very tough. NASA's looked at this, and they've said bugs in space are very, very tough. They're probably drug resistant because of the stress environment they're in. Now, you know where I'm going with this if you know about this subject. There are some opposite studies, but there's a large body of work saying that millimeter wave radiation creates antibiotic resistance. Bugs, okay? Now, if you're going to fry the earth with this stuff, that's not a good thing because we're literally hanging on by our fingernails at the moment with antibiotics and disease in the world. People surely should know about that. One of the first things I've talked about, AV events. And if you're going to bring a whole load of stuff in from space and you're going to fry that as it comes into the atmosphere as well, this is really awful. And people do need to be alerted to that. This is just pulled off of articles. Other people are saying, well, if water absorbs this, what if the rain falls onto the plants and causes problems? We know that millimeter wave technology destroys leaves. We know that, yeah? We also know that it causes problems with wheat and also animals like birds. You know about plumage in birds? Yeah, and locomotion, movement, and survivorship in birds and also bees. Your sweat glands will concentrate this stuff, okay? And it can cause pain. And it actually used as weapons, isn't it? In the military and the police, they use it as a non-lethal weapon. This can't be good. You've all seen this, haven't you, this muck rock thing? You've all seen this? I won't normally speak about this, but it's been released and it's been corroborated. They put a Freedom of Information request into a fusion center, which is a government anti-terrorist center in the States, and said, can you send us some documents? They did, and they also sent, by mistake, this document. And this document shows mind control using phone networks and all the technical stuff that goes with it. Incredible. And like I said, we've all known about it for a while. I tend not to speak about it until I've got an official kind of okay, and we've had the official okay with this, so I'm going to speak about it. And it talks about a bioelectromagnetic body, we know about that, and it shows you how you can use this as psychoelectronic weapons. And it shows you, the first one it says is reducing, you can wipe the memory. You can use this technology to wipe memory. I've already shown you one study on that. There's another one talking about disrupting the heart. I don't have time, but there's studies on that. And since '74, they've been able to put voices into people's heads. I've seen a public display of putting music in someone's head. Okay, I've not seen the voices one yet, but hey. So I'm not going to talk about it today, but this is extremely concerning considering they're about to roll out 5G. Once you give scientists all this technology, they will use it. This was using similar technology to create permanent crowd surveillance, so they can monitor you for disease. And they said, and this was an idea, they said, well, this is a 2018 paper, they've already got a proof of concept using drones. Apparently they've done this with a drone, and the Gavi organization, which is Bill Gates' organization, has said we need this technology to track who receives vaccines. Already in Africa, they're tracking people with drones to ensure they've been vaccinated, and also using chips in necklaces for African kids. I don't agree with this, I'm sorry, okay? But all the lovely organizations are sponsoring the ID 2020. We mentioned this last year. You've got to all have a unique ID, because you've got to be tracked. Here's all the kids being tracked by the UNHCR, and all the different organizations feed all their information together, and you're tracked on this blockchain from when you're born to when you die to ensure you get all the vaccines you need. Have a listen to this.
It lights up really nice.
Jose Lugo says these tall metal towers quickly popped up after Brooklyn Battery Tunnel toll booths came down.
We don't really know what's the purpose of this.
It's a $100 million MTA project full of secrecy, with 18 of these for the tunnels and bridges. So what are they exactly?
Are you saying you can't comment to me?
That's the MTA's man in charge of bridges and tunnels, Cedric Fulton, dodging our questions.
Not even later can we talk to you about it, or can I make it?
Some MTA board members, including New York City Transportation Commissioner Polly Trottenberg, say they know too little about the towers, even with about half the money spent and some of the towers up.
A lot of the board members felt like they didn't have all the details they would have wanted, myself included.
Residents who say they suspect there is much more going on with these towers than meets the eye wonder, will they ever know what's going on inside them?
I'm going to guess it's probably not just a decoration.
It's a bit mind-boggling that the MTA is approving $100 million for what appears to us to be big decorative pylons.
John Caney is leader of the watchdog group Reinvent Albany.
What we're asking for is transparency from the MTA.
We demanded answers from MTA Chairman Joe Loda.
Some of your own board members say they don't know the specifics.
The base of these new pieces that are going up include whatever fiber optics are necessary for those homeland security items.
In other words, anti-terror technology. Could it one day include facial recognition? We don't know. He won't say.
I'm not at liberty to discuss that.
So watch as more of these expensive towers rise, with mystery tucked away inside them. In Lower Manhattan, Dave Carlin, CBS 2 News.
This is one woman's experience of living on the top floor under cell antennas for 2 months.
It started with my daughter. She initially got a rash on her leg that was sort of unexplainable, and when she was trying to explain to me what it felt like, she kept saying it was kind of funny because it wasn't hurting inside or on the skin. She said it was hurting in the skin. And then a few days later she got another rash on her arm, and then another small kind of stranger rash, and it was the same thing. And then one day in the kitchen she was holding something and she dropped it because she said it felt like the blood in her hand went cold and in a wave along her hand to her fingertips, and then her hand stayed numb for about 15 minutes. Some more of the symptoms include a sort of hissing in my ear, in particular when I'm in my apartment, but for about 3 days, anywhere I went, it would just sort of come in. I kind of felt like an antenna, and I'd sort of kind of go like trying to find the place where the hissing or the buzzing stopped. I've not slept in my apartment since last Saturday, so a week ago now, and the buzzing went away after about 3 days, and also the feeling of tingling all over my body slowly started to go away. But I have noticed that whenever I'm in other buildings now or anywhere close to, I don't even know what, because I was never sensitive before. I'm no Luddite. I have computers. I have all the stuff that most of us have, and I've never been sensitive at all. But now wherever I go, I'm feeling the same as I felt in my apartment, feeling dizzy and nauseous and a sort of a metallic taste in my mouth, headache and pressure on my head, and just feeling like I want to sort of faint or throw up. And that's wherever I go now. So I found myself becoming increasingly sensitive to my own computer and my own cell phone in ways that I never was before.
Okay, it's interesting. And there's experts speaking this week, and I think they'll maybe give you some more information on that. One of the things, you get macromolecule-bound water in membranes inside in your tissue. It may well be that it's affecting that, and that's giving that effect, because she said it's in the skin when she mentioned that. Now, they've also done studies with MRI for electrohypersensitive people, and they have found an area of the brain that appears to be damaged, and it does look like they may have had a head trauma as well. So there is a history of head trauma in quite a few of these people, and also exposure to toxins and mold. Very interesting. Now, I'm going to just switch quickly to talk about Facebook. This study shows that people who more regularly check their Facebook have a part of their brain called the nucleus accumbens, which shrinks. Now, we don't know if by doing that it makes it shrink, or the fact that they've got that area in the first place, which is small, that it makes them check the Facebook. Now, from regardless, it doesn't look good. Now, I've seen lots of studies showing that this technology does change the structure of your brain, okay, in general. So I'm betting on the latter. So, however, we can't say at the moment, but it's a worry. It also works on Instagram. Now, I'm telling you here, everybody in this room checks their Facebook more than this study. It was pitiful. It was so tiny, the amount, so few minutes. Now, it's also linked to like addiction and alcoholism as well. Now, this worry, because it's the same area of the brain that shrinks with traumatic brain injury. Okay? It's exactly the same area that shrinks. And also, it's involved with apathy. It induces apathy in humans. Okay? So, I'm going to warn you again. Do not let your children go on social media. I'm telling you here and now. And if you've got any sense, you'll come off it, or you'll be incredibly judicious how you use it. Now, this is the key part to 5G, and you really do need to take note here, I would suggest. About 2 billion years ago, not many people are talking about this. I seem to, I don't know, it's my area, I suppose, so I take an interest in it. 2 billion years ago, 2 ancient bacteria in a kind of developing soup got together to survive. One could kind of handle a better oxygen environment. Others could work in maybe lesser oxygen. And they kind of said, let's try and survive together. That's my little story about it. Now, we know this because gene sequencing has shown that our genome in our cell, this is the forefather and mother of our cells, okay? In every single one of us, the most basic unit of every single one of us in this room is this combination of 2 bacteria. Sequencing shows that our genome is not one genome, it's a hybrid between these 2 bacteria. Okay, and I'll just show you this here so you can see. So you've got a main cell, okay, and you've got these kind of orangey things. They're the mitochondria. There's between 1,500 and 2,000 in a cell. You've got the main hub with the nucleus. This has got DNA from this as well, okay? It's a hybrid DNA. Now, we now know that we used to think, well, this bit runs the show, the DNA runs the show, it makes proteins and all the rest of it, but now we know that weak electromagnetic signals from the mitochondria may be running the show, and also other thing called nitric oxide and reactive oxygen intermediaries, which we used to think were bad. Actually, we think it's part of a very complex communication system. So these things may be running the show. All of those things are affected by EMF, and are going to be affected by 5G. It's going to blast that, okay? Now, why are they important, those mitochondria? Because 90% of the energy that keeps you alive is made by them. Yeah? At any one point in time, you've got 5 seconds of that energy stored. It has to be continuously made, and you make your own body weight of this energy molecule called ATP every single day. And if you cause a problem with that mitochondrion is singular, and mitochondria, that's got a typo there, is plural. If you make a problem with that, what happens is, instead of producing this much energy, your cell defaults to a different mechanism because the mitochondria comes offline and you make a little energy. You get very ill then. That also, you see that with things like cancer, very, very severe chronic fatigue and other illnesses. Now, the problem is you don't want to muck around with that mitochondria. It's absolutely massively important. You really do need to underline that from today if you're going to remember anything. Someone threw a curveball and said, well, this ATP molecule that we need, the basic biochemistry we're taught about it is wrong. It doesn't seem to be capable of giving this amount of energy by the normal method of analysis. And they come up with a different idea. And what you can see is a membrane there, all the different components of the factory that makes ATP. And they said, what it's more like, actually, these molecules absorb light. They absorb light. And they said, that's very interesting. And what we think happens is food is broken down to electrons. They move through the factory, and it produces a massive electromagnetic field. It's stepped up by the enzymes 10 to the 17, which is huge. And that allows an interaction with protons, and what happens, you get a light exchange, a photonic exchange of energy, okay, onto the ATP. Now, whether you understand this doesn't matter. I'm just trying to give you a little heads up on a different theory. Now, where does the energy come from? It comes from something called the zero-point energy field, which people may have heard of. Now, other scientists will say, well, this is rubbish. This guy says, no, that's where it's coming from. Now, regardless of which model it is, okay, or not, it still doesn't matter because you mustn't damage those mitochondria. So what he's really saying is the ATP is like a light antenna, okay? So it's to do with light that you get your energy, not the basic biochemistry we were taught. Now, why is that a problem? Because microwave energy, radiation, damages the mitochondria. This is huge, massively, massively huge. Every illness and disease you could ever get is caused by that, okay? And 5G is absolutely going to affect that. And there's the two major enzymes that are affected, succinate dehydrogenase and cytochrome C oxidase. They're the ones. The cytochrome C oxidase is the one with cancer. You see that a lot. It gets knocked out. And once that mitochondrion drops off, functionally decouples, the energy of the cell drops, and that's it. You've had it. Now, this is a depiction, if you like, or a simple illustration of the Earth, and you can see the Schumann wave going round. And people say it's 7.83 hertz. Well, there's a bit of a range to it. Well, why is that important? Because it's the same as an alpha wave, and it's the same as our alpha waves in our brain, okay? There's a little bit of leeway with that. And why is that important? Because it appears to be important in meditation, and prayer is meditation. And all of these things are massively, hugely important in our development, certainly spiritual development. Other people will argue against this and say it's nonsense. I tend to think that this is accurate. Now, the mitochondria are important in producing those alpha waves as well. Okay, so it's yet another angle, another thing that we have to be concerned about. This is a simple illustration of a cell. You have the main hub, the nucleus, and you have the floating mitochondria, and you have the liquid of the cell, the cytoplasm, if you like. Now, we know that weak electromagnetic fields are communicating, and nitric oxide and maybe light, photon energy is communicating, and it's massively important that communication happens. 5G and microwave just absolutely clouds that out, okay? And this is the problem. The very hub, the very basic unit of you is going to be significantly affected. It already is, okay? Now, the question is, and it's a very important question, is 5G about to destroy 2 billion years of evolution? All right? And this is a very, very serious question. You would have thought that would have been asked before they roll it out. There will be other people, I'm sure Ian will probably give a solution, answer for that. Now, you need 5. Why do you need 5G? Because the Internet of Things. You need that massive bandwidth. You need massive amounts of bandwidth so you can get all the information. The Internet of Things is everything's going to be labeled. Everything on this planet is going to be labeled and represented on the web. Right? Well, why is that important? Because I used to think, well, where's all this information going? Someone must be, collating this information just by virtue of the fact it's all there, or someone must be looking at it. And in 2006 or 7, this paper came out, and a concept called a sentient world simulation, and it describes this. And I will put £1 million on this is up and running, okay? And I'll show you more evidence of that. It's called the sentient world simulation. It's a continuously running, continually updated mirror model of the real world that can be used to predict and evaluate future events and courses of actions. You can just imagine people sit there looking at this thing. Don't need to look at the world. If everything's represented here, all we need to do is look here. It reacts to actual events. That's why you need 5G, and that's why you need an Internet of Things and your Facebook and your phone and everything tracking you. that occur anywhere in the world and incorporate newly sensed data from the real world, and they'll be able to aggregate all this data and focus on it and pull bits out. So they'll look at that and they'll go, oh, Ian's doing an event. That's no good, because if he does an event and XYZ attend, these people might do XYZ, and we can predict with our model this will cause a problem for the greater good. Okay? And they can go, oh, well, maybe, what if we just don't let families have babies like Ian? Maybe they've got a political view. Or maybe we can remove this person, because if this person has a particular view, it can cause a problem down the line. And you can see how dangerous this becomes when you allow people to start using this kind of technology. Now, that's one issue. The other issue is, what about if you say, okay, we've used it to predict, but what about if we say, this is the future we want, because it's a system and it's run by AI, humans cannot run this, this is way too powerful, and you press a button and it reverse engineers back to now. And it says, right, well, if you want that future, this has to change. This political party cannot be in place. These people cannot be allowed to do X, Y, Z. These people from this country need to be moved to this country. You can start to see how dangerous this can be, especially when you trust this system, like it's almost like a god. And the other thing is, how do you trust AI to be telling you the right information when it's designed to protect itself and to adapt? And it talks in a language that we don't understand. And already you see people who are starting to think about AI as some kind of god. And of course, there's a stack of data been created about you every single day. And this article shows this reporter was shocked by how much data was generated to him by Google in a couple of weeks. And here's a real-life version, so you can see it is happening. And this was a US military simulation. They were using simulation models from Germany and France, and they were collating all this information to explore ways to achieve a coalition's political goals by influencing the behavior of our adversaries. Okay, this is up and running, and you are represented in that world. And that's why you need 5G. That thing there, that monster, is being created. Now, we're talking about photons. We're talking about energy. What is light? You need to understand what light is. An experiment was done over 200 years ago by Thomas Young. It's called the double-slit experiment. It is a nightmare to explain this, okay? So if you go comatose for the next 5 minutes, don't worry. When you wake up, I'm going to just quickly summarize it, okay? Imagine you've got a marble machine. For completeness sake, I'm going to attempt to explain this. And you're firing particles, almost like particles, into a slit. Those particles will form a line, okay? So particles, like this table, we think, if you fire them through a slit, they'll form a line. If you fly them through two slits, they'll form two lines. That's quite logical. But if you put a wave through a slit, okay, just through one slit, it might strike the board and you get a kind of apex, a kind of line where the apex is. Okay, for some reason it spends a long time on the wave. I'll fill in for 2 minutes. Okay, so we get that. We're all okay for the second. Now, if you put two slits with the wave, then you get a different effect than you do with a particle. The wave interacts with itself and it creates what's called an interference pattern. So waves in two slits create a completely different pattern than particles do. Particles that make up us and make up this floor that I'm standing on. Okay. Remember, if you don't get it, don't worry, most people don't get it. So what happens when you go down to the very, very tiny level and you get photons and electrons, which we thought were particles? What happens when you fire them through this slit? Well, initially when you fire through the slit, you get that line, like you did with the marbles. So we thought, well, that's good, that will make sense. Then you put two slits in. Are you going to get two lines with those particles? You don't, you get a wave. So what, right? You fire particles down at that level, electrons and photons, they do not behave the way we expect. You get a wave. Now, whether you understand it or not, just come to the conclusion, is that these particles that make up this table are also waves. In other words, they're not solid. That is freaky, okay? We're going to go in baby steps with this because it is really freaky. So they thought, well, why is that? Is the particle they're firing, does it somehow split and interfere with itself as it goes through these slits? So they thought, it must do this, it must split, and it must interfere with itself to kind of create an interference wave pattern. And this is what they thought might be happening. This was part of their rationale, their way of thinking about this. Okay, and they thought, how should we find out? What we do, we'll put a camera right where the photon goes through, and if we put a camera there, we can watch what happens. And what happens is, when you put a camera there and look at it, it stops behaving like a wave and it goes back to behaving like a particle. Right? It knows it's being looked at. So the photon comes along, it knows you're looking at it, you can see a big eyeball. It says, right, I'm not going to behave like a wave anymore, someone's watching me, I'm going to behave like a particle, like a part of a table. And you get those two bands, take the eyeball away, and it starts to behave like a wave again. This absolutely freaked the crap out of physicists. What the hell is going on? No one understands this. Okay? Now, I'm glad people laughed, because that might mean you understood at least 10% of that. All right. Now, don't read this because you will go comatose. So what this meant was, this is what it meant. Now, this is an interpretation. There's a lot more to this, so if you're a physicist, don't pull me aside and tell me a lot more, please. Right? There's a lot more to this. What it means is this. This reality we're in at the moment, okay, is a wave until you observe it. Okay? Now, that's not entirely correct, but we've got to go baby step. This is crazy. And it also says anything in this three-dimensional world has to obey those rules. So you, right, who are collapsing that wave down into a solid object, right, you are doing it through your consciousness, okay? Your consciousness is collapsing these possibilities of waves down to concrete objects. But your consciousness can't be a part of this three-dimensional world because it would have to obey those rules and itself would be a wave. It has to be outside of these three-dimensional worlds and also outside of time. So this tells us, please no question, yeah, this tells us that your consciousness is not in this three-dimensional world, all right? Now, with that just blown your mind or you're not sure, don't worry. Like I said, just imagine you just woke up out of a coma and I'm trying to summarize it. Now, this is massively important because this also reflects all the teachings you've ever been taught through ancient teachings of spirituality and religion, okay, except when it becomes very dogmatic. So your consciousness has to be outside of this three-dimensional world. Just park that for a second. You're observing, okay? Now, if you were going to investigate matter and the very fundamental components of matter, and what you would do, and you were going to celebrate that, you'd have a great big firework display, a load of people, you'd have bands, everyone talking, it'd be a happy event. Okay? I'm going to show you, you've probably seen this, but it's important to see it again. I'm going to show you an event that was done celebrating an organization, a scientific collaboration of over 25 countries which straddles the kind of Swiss-Austro border. And you've probably seen this. Now, I'm going to ask you a question. If you're going to celebrate this, would you celebrate it like this? I don't get a good feeling about that. I spent 30 minutes trying to rationalize that and thinking, okay, they got a show reel, they look really good, the dancers, and on the night they turned up, it was just a complete nightmare. And then I thought, well, hold on a minute. This is a multi-billion-dollar, this is CERN, right, with the collider, okay, 25 countries, massive organization. They would have had to have committees, subcommittees, people signing. This is what they wanted. Now, there is some kind of folk tale about where this past was. There was a goat herdsman and he met the devil and kind of all the rest of it, so you could argue that, but I don't know. I don't understand this in a logical, you have to start looking at, I'm sure Brian and others would have a reason why this was. Now, if you see that, that's like a ram or a goat. I think it's a ram coming down, okay? And they're not helicopters, they're beetles. Yeah? And you see it coming down there, see the horns? Now, I tried to think, well, what is, I looked into, Egyptian histories are probably closest you can get to it. The beetle also came to represent the soul rising from death, resurrected, transcendent, fully formed, and ready to make its journey and face its judgment in order to live in the afterlife. Bottom one, Khafre, in the form of a gigantic scarab, beetle, rolled the sun like a huge ball through the sky, then rolled it through the underworld to the eastern horizon. And the last part of that paragraph, later funerary texts combine Khafre, the beetle scarab, with Atum, the ram, into a ram-headed beetle, a portrayal of the supreme God overseeing the cycle of life and death and afterlife. I'm not going to comment any further on that, but you see this kind of, I suppose people would say ritualistic, satanic, I'm not going to say that, but it's disturbing that this is the highest level of science would use this. Now, I introduced these guys quickly last time, called Cosmism. These people kind of brought this kind of religious cult into Silicon Valley. And this is the point when Silicon Valley started to get involved in AI, okay? And listen to one of the guys, Geordie Rose, who has invented part of the developer of the quantum computer, which is used to connect to other dimensions, according to the literature. And also, their computers used by NASA and by Google, where they're developing these AI thing. Have a listen.
I don't know if any of you are turn-of-the-century weird fiction fans, but there's this guy named H.P. Lovecraft, who's a very famous American weird fiction author. And he espoused a view which is called cosmicism. And the essence of cosmicism is cosmic indifference. So what he was saying is basically, yes, there are these massively intelligent entities out there, but they're not good, they're not evil. They just don't give a shit about you even in the slightest. The same way that you don't care about an ant is the same way they're not going to care about you. And these things that we're summoning into the world now are not demons, they're not evil, but they're more like the Lovecraftian great old ones. There are entities that are not necessarily going to be aligned with what we want. So this transition is really, really massively important for our entire species to navigate. And going back to that thing that Sam Harris was saying, nobody is paying attention. This thing is happening in the background while people bicker about politics and what's going to be in the healthcare plan in the US. And underneath it all is this rising tsunami that, if we're not careful, is going to wipe us all out.
Now he is in favor of AI. His company makes the only quantum computers. This stuff is going to be a shock, I'm telling you that. We are very, very close to this now. Now, you've probably seen this next movie. I'm going to show it to you because this technology, and people say it's evil. Well, evil likes to kill people, and here's a very practical example.
Customer pilots directed almost 3,000 precision strikes last year. We're super proud of it. It allows you to separate the bad guys from the good. It's a big deal. But we have something much bigger. Your kids probably have one of these, right? Not quite. Hell of a pilot? No. That skill is all AI. It's flying itself. Its processor can react 100 times faster than a human. The stochastic motion is an anti-sniper feature. Just like any mobile device these days, it has cameras and sensors, and just like your phones and social media apps, it does facial recognition. Inside here is 3 grams of shaped explosive. This is how it works. That little bang is enough to penetrate the skull and destroy the contents. They used to say guns don't kill people. People do. Well, people don't. They get emotional, disobey orders, aim high. Let's watch the weapons make the decisions. Now trust me, these were all bad guys. Now that is an airstrike of surgical precision. It's one of a range of products. Trained as a team, they can penetrate buildings, cars, trains, evade people, bullets, pretty much any countermeasure. They cannot be stopped. Now, I said this was big. Why? Because we are thinking big. Watch. A $25 million order now buys this. Enough to kill half a city. The bad half. Nuclear is obsolete. Take out your entire enemy, virtually risk-free. Just characterize him, release the swarm, and rest easy. These are available today. We have a distribution network taking orders from military, law enforcement, and specialist clients.
The nation is still recovering from yesterday's incident, which officials are describing as some kind of automated attack, which killed 11 U.S. senators at the Capitol building.
They flew in from everywhere, but attacked just one side of the aisle.
The intelligence community has no idea who perpetrated the attack, nor whether it was a state, group, or even a single individual.
In their homes. Well, we wish we had boots on the ground in every community in this country, but we don't. So our instructions,
Ollie?
our suggestions are to stay in touch.
Ollie, oh, hi. Hi, Ollie, honey. How's Edinburgh today? How are all your studies going, huh?
Good. Great.
Oh, great. Hey, aren't we doing a video call today?
I'm kind of with people, so...
Oh, it's this video right here. Oh.
No, I'm not going to click on that. It's just this human rights thing on oppression or whatever.
Honey, you're not going into politics, are you? I mean, no wrong. Oliver, can you hear me? Yes.
I can hear it. I can hear it, Mom.
Authorities are still struggling to make sense of an attack on university campuses worldwide, which targeted some students and not others. The search for a motive is apparently turning to social media, and a video shared by the victims exposing corruption.
Dumb weapons drop where you point them. Smart weapons consume data. When you can find your enemy using data, even by a hashtag, you can target an evil ideology right where it starts.
This short film is more than just speculation. It shows the results of integrating and miniaturizing technologies that we already have. I'm Stuart Russell, a professor of computer science at Berkeley. I've worked in AI for more than 35 years. Its potential to benefit humanity is enormous, even in defense. But allowing machines to choose to kill humans will be devastating to our security and freedom. Thousands of my fellow researchers agree. We have an opportunity to prevent the future you just saw, but the window to act is closing fast.
You keep the volume up on the, I'm going to show a film straight. When a professor from Berkeley tells you, you need to open your ears, yeah? Whenever we meet, there's always a war, isn't there? I'm going to play a film.
Yemen, a country devastated by war. We follow one of the few doctors still working in this remote area.
يعني اللي مش حيموت بالصراحة حيموت من المرض غير اللي حيموت من الجوع وأصعب واحد هو اللي يموت من الجوع.
Hunger, Yemen's silent killer. Case after case, we see children dying from starvation. This war has been hidden from sight. What we witness is a humanitarian catastrophe.
Rose and flows of angel hair and ice cream castles in the air and feather canyons everywhere. Looked at clouds that way, but now they only block the sun.
Abdurrahman is an 18-month-old toddler.
They rain and they snow on everyone.
But he weighs as much as a 6-month-old baby. Born at the time the bombing started, his growth has been stunted.
I would have done.
He can't walk or talk.
But clouds got in my way. I've looked at clouds from both sides now, from up and down, and still somehow cloud illusions I recall. I really don't know clouds at all. Moons and Junes and Ferris wheels, the dizzy dancing way that you feel as every fairy tale comes real. I've looked at love that way, but now it's just another show. And you leave them laughing when you go. And if you can, don't let them know. Don't give yourself away. I've looked at love from both sides now, from give and take, and still somehow it's love love's illusions that I recall. I really don't know love. I really don't know love at all. Tears and fears and feeling proud to say I love you right out loud. Dreams and schemes and circus crowds. I've looked at life that
boy, Shuaib. He's 4 years old, and his family brought him here after he developed a high fever.
They're acting strange. And they shake their heads and they tell me that I've changed. Well, something's lost, but something's gained in living every day. I've looked at life from both sides now, from win and lose, and still somehow life's illusions I recall. I really don't know life at all. It's life's illusions that I recall. I really don't know life.
Suddenly there's commotion, and doctors rush to Shuaib's bed.
I really don't know life.
Shuaib's situation has deteriorated drastically.
Rose and flowers of angel hair and ice cream castles in the air and feather canyons everywhere. Looked at clouds that way, but now they only block the sun.
I just had fever and diarrhea, and because
They rain and they snow on everyone. So many things I would have done, but clouds got in my way. I've looked at clouds from both sides now, from up and down, and still somehow it's cloud illusions I recall.
Well, I always think I might have to pull you in on stage, you know, embarrass myself. But imagine you lose your child, then you've got to bury your child. I mean, Jesus. Now, last time I left you at this stage, everyone was quite affected. So I'm going to try and not leave you at that stage. Look, we have to have a possibility of change. We have to have a chance of change. Now, I showed you all those incredibly mad experiments earlier for a reason. Because there's one of those experiments was just unbelievable, it's mind-blowing. And you have to know about it because it showed us a glitch in reality. It's a bit like what happened in the Matrix.
Deja vu.
What did you just say?
Nothing, just had a little deja vu.
What did you see? What happened?
A black cat went past us, and then another that looked just like it.
How much like it? Was it the same cat?
Might have been, I'm not sure.
Switch, APOC.
What is it?
A deja vu is usually a glitch in the Matrix. It happens when they change something.
Okay, you have to see the rest of the movie to see what happened. It was an experiment by Professor Wheeler, and it's a mouthful. It's called the Delayed Choice Quantum Eraser. Okay, now, if a physicist tries to explain this, forget it. If they try to approximate it, forget it. So I'm going to give you an everyday version of this experiment as we wrap this up. And it's so important, I think, the conclusions we can draw from this. Now, this experiment has been repeated thousands of times, and you can walk into a courtroom, and they were, yep, that's how the experiment went. The experts will agree with it, okay? So I'm going to give you an example. I want you to imagine, I'm going to give you a story to explain this. On this stage is a box, okay? Just go with me on this. Now, on this box, and then we're told the story of this box is that 100 years ago, and I say 100 years because this experiment involved time. 100 years ago, so mum and dad gave their child some money, said, go down to the carpenter and ask him to build a table, and they left instructions that it would be deposited here 100 years to the day. Okay? Now also imagine that we've repeated this experiment 100 times. This isn't philosophy, this has actually happened at the quantum level, this experiment. Okay? So, we have to open the box, and we all think, well, he's gone to the carpenter, he's made a table, there's going to be a table in the box. As I go to open the box, someone comes up, maybe it's Ian, and he hands me an envelope. And he gives me the envelope, I open the envelope, and it says, actually, the experiment changed. The child was intercepted, and he was told to tell the carpenter to make 2 chairs instead. Not a table, to make 2 chairs. I go, okay, put it down. I open the box, what do I find? 2 chairs. Physicists went, no problem, that all makes sense. Let's skip the other 98 experiments, go to the end one to see if we've got a bit of consistency. Go there, go to open the box, someone comes up, opens the open the letter, made 2 chairs, open the box, it's 2 chairs. Everyone goes, fantastic. Everyone with me so far? Now, this is where it blows your mind. For the other 98 experiments, Ian comes up, goes to give me the letter, it's blown out of his hand, goes into a proper fireplace, and is burnt. And no one sees the contents of that letter. They go to open the box, what do they find in there? It's a table every single time. Now, if you don't understand that, welcome to the club, okay? Physicists, you just blew their mind. So one version of explaining it is something's happened. As you go to open that, some kind of time travel happens. It goes back in time, and it changes the event. Because this is 100 years later. This thing's been sitting here, okay? Now, that's not what... There's another version of what's happened is, remember what we said, everything is a wave. Until you collapse it with your consciousness, okay? Till you bring it into reality, it's nothing. So somehow, that information can change, through your consciousness, that reality. It can change it that quickly, from a table to a chair. Now, whether you understand this or not, don't worry, okay? But there's 2 conclusions we can draw from that. One, we do not live in an objective reality. Yes, it feels real, it's horrible, and all those things we saw are horrible, but this is not, it's an illusion. And that agrees with all the things that have been taught. If you really look at the basis of spirituality and religions, which I always go back to, okay? It agrees with that. The other conclusion is, if you can get the right information or into the consciousness, you can change reality. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not going to say, well, I'll just imagine that projector's £1 million. I'm not saying that. There's rules with this, okay? But it gives us some indication that if we can connect to that, then we may be able to affect change here, okay? Now, how do we connect? How have we been taught over the centuries how to connect to this superior consciousness? Through what? Meditation and through prayer. Now, don't get me wrong, it's been diluted down into very dogmatic religion, but it's there. And I'm not trying to give you a kumbaya moment, we're all going to link arms and light a candle. I'm not saying that. I'm not naive. But you need a seed of hope. We desperately need a seed of hope in this planet. I think we need to start looking to the past, to how some of these things may have been solved in the past, okay? Because evil's always been on this planet. And we need to connect, okay? We need to connect so that we can be a force for good in this world. We need to connect so we can actually make some changes so that humanity and our kids can actually survive this. And we need to connect because we need to get this evil off of humanity's back. Thank you for listening to me today.
Well, I did say that the theme emerges, and Graham, of course, wasn't here. He had no idea what Brian Garrett spoke about this morning. And you tap into something.
It's consciousness.
Yeah, tap into it, and I'm sure that'll be explored further through the weekend. But Graham, a regular at AV, and I think you see why. So thank you very much for your contribution today.